Hello, welcome to Spread Book Joy. Today I'm doing the Three Musketeers tag. If you're new to the channel, I'm Jack, and if you're not new, welcome back to Spread Book Joy. And if you're one of my recent subscribers, welcome. Thank you for subscribing. I'm glad to have you here. And today I'm doing a tag by the gorgeous Bekki over at Teacup the Storyteller. It's an original tag by her, based all around her favourite book, The Three Musketeers, which I'm ashamed to say I've never read. And I was tagged by the wonderful Alice over at Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Go and check out both their channels. Bekki is a fairly recent discovery of mine through so many of my other lovely channels that I watch on here. They mentioned her frequently and I had to go and check her out. She's just the sweetest person. She's got amazing taste in books, brilliant editing skills. Go and check her out. She's very creative. And then we've got the lovely Alice over at Alice and Giant Bookshelf, who is just such a lovely person. She is reading her way through her giant TBR of over 200 books. I think it's under 200 now, right, Alice? But I'm not sure. She's got an amazing cat called Harry, and she's an expert on all things Agatha Christie. She's recently done a brilliant guide to getting into books all about Hercule Poirot. So I'm going to link both those channels, Three Musketeers tag videos, in the description box. I'd urge you to go check them out and subscribe to them. They're lovely people. Question 1 is, Alexandre Dumas was born in the 19th century. Do you have a favourite time period to read about? If yes, what do you like about it? Okay, I've got too many favourite time periods to talk about. If I have to pick an ultimate time period to read about in terms of the history, literature from that time, as well as like retellings of things from that period, it would have to be the ancient classical world. And the classical world encompasses Greece and Rome and all of the countries that the Romans occupied during that time. And the Greeks that they'd occupied. So yeah, the ancient classical world. I studied ancient Greece and Rome as part of my degree. I grew up, when I grew up, I didn't know that you could study classics. Classics in this country is quite an elitist subject. It's usually taught in private schools. People learn Latin and ancient Greek and they learn about the classics. It's not really taught over here in state schools. And I had no awareness that you could study the ancient world, ancient classics and classic texts. I had no idea they existed. I didn't know you could study them until I was about 18 or 19, and I worked at Waterstones as a bookseller, and one of the departments I ended up running and being in charge of was the classics department, and that meant all classic literature, and that ranged from ancient classics right through to modern 20th century classics. Actually, at that time it didn't go up to 20th century classics, it was up to probably 19th century classics. 20th century classics tended to go into fiction, but my classics section, I discovered all these ancient authors. I was just blown away by it. I read I Claudius by Robert Graves at that time, and it completely blew my mind. Then I went and read Suetonius's 12 Caesars and Tacitus's Annals of Rome, which the book was based on, which talks about the Claudian emperors, the Julians and Claudians, and I absolutely fell in love with it. So I did a night course and I went to university and I studied a 3-year degree in classical archaeology, and I had fun doing it, and I love that period. So if I had to pick one, it'll be that. But I have to give a massive shout out to several other time periods. Shout out to these time periods because I love them. I love anything to do with the Tudors, tick. Anything to do with any time period in British history generally, actually, but anything to do with the Second World War, I'm always really interested in. I loved the period that sort of talks about as the Dark Ages. Now, it's not really historical because we don't have a historical record, hence why it's called the Dark Ages, but I became a bit obsessed with King Arthur when I was in my teens and read tons of Arthurian retellings. One of my favourite books of all time is an Arthurian retelling, and yeah, I was obsessed with that for a while. So yeah, anything historical I really like. What blows my mind now though is that historical books include books about the 60s and the 50s and the 70s and even the 80s, which I was a child in the 80s, and it's kind of more nostalgia historical stuff for me. But yeah, if you read anything like that, even the 90s is starting to be considered a historical period now, which I can't get over. But anyway, yeah, history, great. That was a really long answer. Maybe the next one will be a bit shorter. Prompt 2. Alexandre Dumas was born in France. Is there a French author whose book you'd recommend? I'm going to have to say I can't recommend any books by French authors. I don't really know if I've read any French authors. Yeah, Can't think of any. If anyone can recommend some to me, I definitely need to read some Alexandre Dumas. The Three Musketeers is Bekki's favourite book, and I loved the D'Artagnan and his Muskehounds series when I was a kid. We watched that non-stop. I think a lot of people about my age will know that, and the song will be stuck in your head now. But yeah, I know the story from watching the cartoon, but yeah, I need to read more Dumas. I think I've also got The Man in the Iron Mask in my collection of classics, but I've never read them. But yeah, if anyone's got any recommendations for other French authors, more modern French authors in translation, because I can't read French, I'd happily hear them in the comments below. 3. Alexandre Dumas often bases novels on real events and historical figures. Is there a person from the past, artists, politicians, simply anyone you would like to meet? David Bowie. I'd love to meet David Bowie. I absolutely worship and adore David Bowie, so yes, that would be one person I would meet. I would also love to meet Jane Austen. Can't think of anyone else off the top of my head. I never really also, to be fair though, say I'd like to meet David Bowie and I'd love to meet Jane Austen, I'd be too starstruck. You should never really meet your heroes, should you? So maybe I'll just scratch that. I don't want to meet anyone from the past. I don't want to meet my heroes, though I might want to watch them from afar. Maybe go and see a David Bowie concert. That's about the limit of it. 4. Alexandre Dumas wrote some pretty chunky books. For example, The Count of Monte Cristo is almost over 1,000 pages, as opposed to his son, Alexandre Dumas Jr, whose only book, The Lady of the Camellias, is less than 180 pages. What is the longest and shortest book you've read? Now, I had to dig out some things here because I thought straight away I know exactly what the longest book I've ever read is, and by page count, though, not word count, because I had a thought about this. Now, a lot of you might know I'm currently reading War and Peace, which I've not finished, so I can't say I've read it. But War and Peace, most people think of as like the longest book translated in English, I suppose. And it's by page count. This edition is 1,358 pages, 1,358 pages. Whereas A Suitable Boy by Vikram Seth, I believe at the time of publication, was the longest novel published in English. And it clocks in at 1,474 pages. And I read this about 20 something years ago, back when I worked at Waterstones, back when I read I, Claudius, back when I read about 4 or 5 books a week, because there was no internet and all I did was read, and I worked in a bookshop. So yeah, Suitable Boy I was going to have down as the longest book I've ever read. But is it? Because does longest mean page count, or does it mean word count? Now, I suppose I could Google word count of this and word count of some of the other books that have clocked in over 1,000 pages. I mean, this is going to be the longest because 1,474 pages of fairly small type, I suppose. You know, that's going to be a big word count. But then I was thinking about other books that are over 1,000 pages, and just thinking about length of book, if it's pages or words, I don't know. This is the Arthurian book I was telling you about, The Mists of Avalon, which is one of my favourite books of all time, and I read it when I was 13, and it's just like feminist retelling of the Arthur legend. I have since reread it. It brings me back that kind of nostalgic feel, but I don't know if I love it as much as I did. I love it for the nostalgia. However, this is 1,008 pages, but it's quite tiny type. So actually, in terms of word count, how long is this? And if we're going to go into length of book by word count, or length of book, the other thing that's really big is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, Brando Sando, and he wrote Way of Kings. Now, it's been released in paperback in 2 volumes. It's actually one book, and it's released as 2 volumes because if it would just be too chunky, because they like to, instead of releasing a book of this size now, books tend to be this, I can't remember if there's a B category paperback or C cat. Yeah, there's like different sizes of paperback. When I was a bookseller, I used to know them. I think this is a C type, which is the size of most paperbacks these days. And this is over 1,000 pages, but what is it in word count? I don't know. Equally, if we're talking about books that have been split into volumes, then also it could be the longest book I've read might be The Lord of the Rings, because The Lord of the Rings, if you know anything about it, it's not 3 books. It's a book published in 3 volumes. It's one single story. So again, is this the longest book I've ever read? I don't know. I do think they'd all have to go some way though to beat A Suitable Boy. And in terms of word count, you know, I think if we're going to look at the longest thing you've ever read, I think you're going to have to look at word count rather than pages. But I do think they're going to have to go some to be longer than A Suitable Boy. I'll have to look up the word count of A Suitable Boy and see what it is. Now, shortest book, that was harder. And you're probably going to get bored with me talking about this now, but the shortest book was a lot harder because at the moment a lot of my personal library is stuck away in cupboards. So I decided I'm going to Google short novels and see what comes up. One of the things that came up was something I really reread last year or the year before, and that was The Great Gatsby. Apparently that's quite a short book. It's less than 200 pages, I believe. Same ditto with A Clockwork Orange. That is also a fairly short novel. Last year, I think the shortest book I read was Roger Zelazny's Nine Princes in Amber. Or was it? Yeah, I think it might have been this, which is 174 pages, but it's like really tiny pages. They're not big pages. I mean, it's quite small print. So that was like quite short. But I also read The Picture of Dorian Gray. That clocked in at around 200 pages. But again, word count could be longer or shorter than Nine Princes in Amber. I don't know. The other option, and this is where word count would make a difference, is because I also read Cranford. Now, I read this edition of Cranford, but I've also got this edition. This edition of Cranford, if we're looking at page count, clocks in at 187 pages. That's this one. And this edition of Cranford, page count, clocks in at 160. So page count isn't really a good measure of the length of a book, is it? Because you've got different typefaces, different page sizes, all sorts of things. And I'm probably overthinking this a bit much, but there you go. That's me, overthinking books all the time. Bekki, you're going to be sorry you asked these questions, and Alice, that you asked me to do this. Question 5. I don't think there's a single video where I wouldn't mention my favourite book, The Three Musketeers. Is there a book you want everyone to know about? It can be your favourite book of all time or some recent read you'd recommend to other people. I'm going to do a short answer to this one. If it's fiction, then no, there isn't a book I'd recommend to absolutely everybody, even if it's my favourite book, because I see book recommendations to individuals as very personal to the person. I love to find the perfect book for that person, because everyone's different, aren't they? And I could recommend several of my favourite books and people might hate them. So there's not a single book I'd go, oh, everyone must read this, you'd love it, because I know not everybody would love every single book I love. So I never do that. But I did think maybe I would recommend some non-fiction, because I think there are non-fiction books which are really vital to our knowledge and understanding, our productivity, our creativity. And one book that I would recommend for absolutely everybody would get some use out of, and that is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And everyone and their mum has read this, and there's a reason there's such buzz about it. I read it about 3 years ago, and it totally changed my way of doing things, my habits, the way I form them, the things that I like to maintain, the way I fit certain things that I thought I couldn't fit into my life, the way I fit them into my life. So yeah, I'd really recommend that book to absolutely everybody. I don't think there's anyone on the planet who wouldn't get something out of Atomic Habits. 6. One of the most famous quotes in literature, All for One, One for All, came from the pen of Alexandre Dumas. Do you keep a track of your favourite quotes when reading? Do you have at least one quote you'd like to share? Which book does it come from? Oh, Bekki. I do try and keep track of quotes, but I'm really bad at it. I highlight things in my Kindle, I write things in my journal, but they're all sort of all over the place, so even just hunting for them. But I tell you what, I could share one that's been really lovely that I've been looking at every time I open my journal this year. So this is a bit of a corny quote, but I really liked it, and it was on a postcard that I got from the Crow Emporium, which is a fantastic small independent business that publishes beautiful editions of all your favourite books. Go and check them out. She makes the most gorgeous. The woman who runs the Crow Emporium, it's an independent business, and she hires artists to illustrate things, and it's all absolutely wonderful. And I won some things from her. I won an edition of Jane Eyre, which I can show you at some point, but and she had a postcard with a quote from one of my favourite books of all time, Anne of Green Gables, and the quote is this one here. That's it. and I really like this, so I put it on the front of my 2022 bullet journal. So it says, "Dear old world, she murmured, you are very lovely, and I'm glad to be alive in you." So it's kind of like every time I open my journal, I'm like, yes, be reminded of the beauty in the world and how lucky we are to be here in it. So despite all the things that seem to be going on at the moment, there is still beauty and wonderful world to live in. Okay, I'm going to combine the next two questions because they're kind of got the same answer, or same answers, I should say. 7, The Three Musketeers is a book of strong friendship and allegiance. Do you have a favourite fictional friendship? And 8, The Three Musketeers is a story with strong female characters who are brave, fearless, yet gentle and loving. However, some of them prove to be true evil. Do you have a favourite female fictional character? Who is it and why? All right, so I've got so many favourite female fictional characters. I'm going to start with that because those friendships that they have also come into it. Favourite female characters, fictional characters, well, I absolutely love Anne of Green Gables, who I've already mentioned. I love Elizabeth Bennet in Pride and Prejudice, who is just clever and witty and funny. I'd love to be like her. And my favourite fictional female character of all time is not a book character, it's a TV show character, and it is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I love her. I was a teen and 20 something in the 90s when the show started, and it was the first time of seeing a girl on the screen who was rescuing herself. She ultimately is her own hero. She's a leader, she's brave, and yeah, I loved her so much. I thought she was just the most inspiring character, and I love the friendship within Buffy the TV show. Absolutely love it, hands down one of the best found families ever. One of my other favourite friendship groups is Harry, Ron and Hermione in Harry Potter. I don't talk about Harry Potter much on here, but yeah, I absolutely love that friendship. And another friendship that I absolutely adore, of course, is Sam and Frodo. Particularly Sam. Sam is just an amazing character. He's the real hero of Lord of the Rings, if you ask me, in my opinion. Some other female characters that I absolutely love, and I can't find the book because it's in the cupboard, but Coraline. I love Coraline. It's my creepy Coraline crochet doll. Wish I could say I did this. I didn't. It was a present. Granny Weatherwax from the Discworld. Love her. Absolutely love that character. And for her bravery and everything else, Arya Stark from A Game of Thrones, from the Song of Ice and Fire series, so it's not just from this book, but yeah, Arya Stark is kick-ass, isn't she? She is brave and resourceful, and yeah, she's just absolutely amazing. And every time a chapter came up, because if you've never read A Song of Ice and Fire, the chapters they follow the perspective of a different character each time, and each chapter is headed with their name. So every time her name came up, one of the chapters, I was just like, yes! Arya and Tyrion. But we're talking about female characters, yeah, Arya Stark, love her. 9, there are more than 50 film adaptations of The Three Musketeers. Is there a film adaptation that you enjoyed more than actual book? It doesn't have to be one of Dumas' books, just any book you've read and its film adaptation. Oh my gosh, there are so many film adaptations I love, but my favourites are the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Just love Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy. I watch it all the time. It's one of those comfort watches. I also completely adore all of the Harry Potter films, all of them, without exception. I love all of them. And Pride and Prejudice, though, my favourite adaptation of anything of all time is the BBC TV adaptation, the 1995 one of Pride and Prejudice, the Colin Firth adaptation, Jennifer Ely, Colin Firth. Absolutely, hands down, one of the best adaptations ever. Every single character amazingly cast and brought to life. I recently watched the 2005, the Keira Knightley adaptation, which I didn't like when I first saw it, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll like it now. No, it doesn't hold a candle to the BBC one, and I know there's plenty of people out there that's their favourite, but it doesn't hold a candle to it. But yeah, I love a good adaptation, and it's equally disappointing when adaptations are poor. Wheel of Time, I'm looking at you. Didn't think that was good at all. I will carry on watching the next season though. Just being a geek. 10. I own 3 different editions of The Three Musketeers. Is there a book you own more than one edition of? There are several books I own more than one edition of. So these are my 2 editions of the Iliad. That was the version I didn't like. That was the version I ended up buying to replace it with. That's the first version of the Odyssey that I bought. That's another version of the Odyssey that I've never read. I think this is the verse in verse. Oh no, it's a prose version. And this is the Odyssey with the Greek translation. It's a Loeb classic, beautiful little cloth bound, and it's got the Greek on one side and the English on the other. But I have 3 copies also, intentionally so, of Pride and Prejudice. I have my oldest copy, which was a 99p or £1 jobby, Penguin Popular Classics. I've read it so many times. The spine is cracked to pieces and I love it. I've got an edition that my brother bought for me when they went to, I think they went to a Jane Austen shop in Bath, and they bought this edition, which is nice. And then I bought some gorgeous vintage classics editions, and I love these. These are stunning. Oh, and here's a lovely quote. Talking about lovely quotes: "You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you." But those are not the most editions of any book that I own. The most editions I own of any book, I own 5 editions of the same book, and yes, it was intentional. And that is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Now, I don't really talk about my love for Potter on here. I am a Potterhead. I love Harry Potter very, very much. And I don't often talk about it on here because I don't think it needs promotion. I don't think it needs to be talked about. And I don't really want to promote the author anymore. I don't think she needs any promotion. And I haven't read any of her recent publications, and I don't intend to. But I do still love this series. It's meant a lot to me. I discovered it as an adult. I was an adult when they came out. I was working in Waterstones, funny enough, and just took me away. And in lots of times in my life when I've had anxiety and had issues, I've listened to Stephen Fry reading it. I still listen to it at night. I was listening to one last night. I was listening to Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince when I couldn't sleep because, you know, I just have that on as a comfort thing. But I have got 5 editions of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I've got the original paperback that I bought. I have another paperback in a set of new paperbacks that I bought to replace the old paperbacks because they were a bit grubby. I've got this edition, which is a Mina Lima edition, which is amazing. I've got the Jim Kay illustrated edition, and I have the 20th anniversary hardback edition of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, as well as, of course, the audio edition. So that's the one that I own the most copies of. Question 11, have you read The Three Musketeers or any other books by Dumas? If yes, which one? And no, I have not, but I will. Question 12, and finally, tag some friends to do this tag. So I'm going to tag MJ over at Reading This Life. I'm also going to tag someone who's pretty new to BookTube, so you should go over and check her out. I'm going to tag Flossie over at the Grape Jelly Library. These are all YouTubers who are fairly new to me, and I discovered Flossie through MJ. And if you like this tag and you fancy doing it yourself, and you're a booktuber or a YouTuber, the questions are in the description box below. Just make sure you tag Bekki so she sees you've done it. And if you're not a booktuber or don't have a channel and you're a watcher, put some of your answers to some of your favourite questions in the description box. No, not description box, in the comments. And hopefully, if you're new here, you'll stick around and subscribe for more of my waffling nonsense. And hopefully, I will see you again here soon. Bye.